Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. The Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Dr. Ibe Kachiku, was recently in Saudi Arabia to attend a summit of the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC. Part of the deliberations was a proposal on the table to extend an oil price cut deal between OPEC members and non-members, which came into effect on January 1st, 2019, which was put in place to control production quotas and glut in the international market. How can Nigeria benefit maximally from this arrangement? For more on this, we're now being joined by Peter Esele, the former president of the Trade Union Congress and the Petroleum and Natural Gas Senior Staff Association of Nigeria. Welcome to the program, Peter.
Good morning.
Good to see you again.
Thank you.
I don't think we've seen this yet, so happy New Year to you.
Thank you for joining us.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, you had my introduction. Initially, Nigeria was talking about, not being part of that OPEC oil supply cut deal. Nigeria wanted to ask for an exemption, but then we became part of it and agreed to reduce our quota by 53,000 barrels per day. And now, the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources is so excited, that there has been an extension till June. Why are we waffling on this issue of OPEC oil cut, and what advantages would seem to make the Minister of State so excited now?
I think what they are trying to do is probably get the price up, because now you have challenges that is coming up between the United States. You have pressures on the price of crude between the United States and China, the trade war. And then you also have the pressure between the United States and Iran on national security issue, as President Trump is calling it. And then when you do all of that, and the expectation is that the price of crude is going to increase. So if the price increases, on one hand, it's good for the economy. And this exemption we've gotten now.
No, we don't have an exemption.
No, the exemption, what they wanted was for us to get an exemption, which of course was turned down.
Yes.
Yes. So what the minister is looking at is, okay, let's assume we get a higher price. Once you get a higher price, then you get more money for your economy. But be that as it may, the bottom line is that we also need to look at several other factors that, of course, may militate against our benefiting from whatever we think we are going to get. And that has to do with how much actually comes in, how much do you spend, and how much at the end of the day is also taken away by subsidy. So those are factors that the minister we're not looking at. So when we look at all of that, you find out that we're in a catch-22 position. I'm not always excited whether the price of crude increases or not, because what you're looking at is you have to get what I'll call an optimal price. Because the OPEC Plus means members of the OPEC cartel and Russia. No country goes into a court because they love you. No, the reason why they are talking about a court is for us to get a higher price. And because Russia, it's more expensive for Russia to produce a barrel of crude than Nigeria, for example, because of the very tough, very difficult terrain. So hopefully, the minister believes that there's going to be more money accruing to the state. But to the ordinary man on the street is, how much is it? What is it worth?
Where is a cut of 53,000 barrels per day, which has dropped our production to about, is it 1.68 million barrels per day? Yes. Now, is it necessarily a good thing in the light of, the alignment with our budget projections?
Short term.
Because you may say we make money, but, what is the long term
in the
effect?
Short term,
yes.
No. In the short term, yes, your budget will take a hit. In the long term is that you are projecting that if things continue the way they are going, the projection is that you are getting about $70 to $80. You are going to get $70, $80, $90, and we are going back to where we were before, hitting up to $100. That's good. But you are going to have a hit, which also, I don't know how government is going to manage the shortfall. So what you have is let's hope that these challenges will not exceed maybe 2 or 3 months. But my challenge is the current battle between the trade war between China and U.S. has tendency to slow down the global economy. And then the challenge also you are having, and each time you also get a price review, that's also where the minister is also not looking at, is that the shale extraction from the U.S. also come into play. Because once the price of crude exceeds $60, it becomes very profitable for you to extract crude. And with the advancement of technology every day in Europe and America, so it's getting easier for them to also extract crude from shale.
Well, the trade wars between the two largest economies in the world and, of course, other global issues are certainly factors that we have to take into account. Now, like Dr. Rubin said, we've been waffling. Nigeria has been waffling. And you mentioned the possibility of us having come out with an exemption, per se. If we did come out with that exemption, let's say we did get that exemption, what would the situation be looking like right now?
First is that you have to calculate how much. Ruben highlighted the difference between what I've heard is about 40,000 barrels. Ruben talked about 53,000 barrels. All you just need to do is to plus it, just plus 53,000 barrels times 31 days or 30 days. Then you have an idea of how many millions of barrels that you are going to lose. And then you calculate that by the going price of crude. If it's 600, if it's $60, and you just multiply about 1.5 million barrels at the end of the month. And you see a revenue shortfall. And that is a huge revenue shortfall. But if you also look, I rather prefer looking at the big picture. Hopefully for us now, the PSC contract is also being renegotiated. There are a lot of things that we don't do right, which is how we negotiate our contracts. So we're also hoping that, okay, you have governors from Delta, Bayelsa, Rivers, Akwa Ibom, who went to court asking for $20 billion. And so you also have, so that is also going to be, and the Supreme Court has already delivered judgment, which is also in the favor of the governors. So that will also help because he said that once the price of crude goes above $20 in the deep offshore, an inland basis, what is expected of you is that you renegotiate contracts. So what the governors have said about $20 billion is outstanding from that aspect.
But it's good to have brought up this issue about production sharing contracts with the IOCs. Yes. Now, there's a story in the papers today, I think this day, saying that, look, the Nigerian government is going to renegotiate, with Shell to start with. Shell's contract expires around 2023, other IOCs in 2028. And that the negotiation with, Shell will provide the template for negotiations with other IOCs. But there was something in that story. Maybe the Minister of State for Petroleum will deny it later. He was saying that, look, these IOCs, when they do all the calculations, they are not going to pay the arrears, from the past. That a new template will come up and then they will continue from there. But I thought that the import of that ruling is that these state governments will get the arrears that they've been owed.
I think what we need to do is let's hear from the minister. I don't think the Supreme Court will not deliver judgment. Basically what you expect is that there should be arrears because it's stated in a contract that once the price exceeds $20, that's what is expected.
Yeah, despite the ongoing efforts by the federal government to ensure that the IOCs refund the shortfalls, Kachiku said the government did not plan to collect that money from the oil companies. What's done is done. They are now quoting him. We need to go forward and avoid that happening again. I thought the expectation of the states would be that they should get refund from
I think they will get. Because when you say, you don't tell somebody who is owing you money and you suddenly now wake up and you say, okay, that is done, so let's start a fresh one. The IOCs, when you do production sharing quota, and even when they ask for joint venture, and NNPC is owing them, there's never a time the IOC says, NNPC, we're forgiving your debt, so let's start, what is done is done. No. I think we'll need, Arise TV or this day also need to get an official statement from the minister so that they clarify that, because I know that the governors will not take that lightly.
Well, let's go back to the issue about the OPEC courts. The ministerial meeting, the OPEC ministerial meeting was supposed to have been in April to take a decision. But, they've taken a decision to meet again in June, and it's in June that they will review the current quotas. How sustainable is this, production cap that OPEC has put in place, although it was agreed, considering the fact that Russia has not been very enthusiastic about the cuts, shale oil, which we referred to. So how sustainable is this?
I think one of the things we also need to give them benefit of that. That's actually why they are meeting again, to do a review. They've already made a decision and they have to look at, okay, these decisions we have made and what are the benefits. They have to do what I call a cost-benefit analysis, and that will now help them to make further decisions. But Russia really have they have to play along with OPEC on this because Russia is also under heavy sanctions from America and the EU over the invasion of Ukraine and over what happened in Crimea. So based on that, what you have now is that the Russians are actually tagging along with OPEC because they believe that if you are cutting about 800,000 barrels a day, that's what they are pulling out of the market. And the expectation is that that would make the price go up, and that would be beneficial to the economy. Russia is not doing that because they love OPEC, but they are doing that because that's the best way to go. But their next meeting will decide whether it is profitable or not.
Okay, and then how does this, of course, then affect or come back to the average man or woman on the streets? We spoke about Ibe Kachiku, our minister, being happy about the results of this, but let's speak about the people now. What are the direct effects on us?
That is key. Ordinarily, you would have expected that with so much money coming in, you have education, you have security, you have basic humanities being made available. But the challenge that you have is that mostly Ibe Kachiku can celebrate on one hand, but Ibe Kachiku is not responsible for setting other policies. He's not responsible for education. He's not responsible in drawing up the budget. And what I always say is that we also get value for money. The biggest problem we have in this part of the world is having value for money. You heard the president's wife over the weekend talking about 500 billion naira social intervention program, which you feel nothing has happened. And then I got a call from somebody in the US who is doing his PhD, and he said, Mr. Esele, in your country, don't people do pilot project? How will you spend 500 billion naira and nobody can account for it? So if that is what is going to happen, then the likelihood of having a trickle-down effect on the ordinary man is very slim.
Well, you know, when OPEC in January announced the production caps, the Minister of State for Petroleum, Dr. Kachiku, he said Nigeria is going to bridge the gap by concentrating on local refining, by strengthening local refining. And then there was a lot of enthusiasm about Total's project, the Egina project, which is even more of condensate, according to him. Now, where are we with that local refining? Because I'm not hearing a lot about that anymore. Instead, there is so much enthusiasm and forward-looking about Dangote refinery. What's the situation with our local refineries right now?
I think the local refineries, if you are looking at the NNPC local refinery, I think that is not something for us to cheer about, because the NNPC refineries are not different from where they were a couple of years back. There is no refinery in Nigeria at the moment under NNPC that you can say will give you what I call optimal production. No, there's none. I think the only hope that the state or the government has is the Dangote refinery. But we keep hearing, once one was thinking it would come up in 2019, but what we're hearing now is probably going to be last quarter in 2020. But I think those who are in charge of those refineries will be in the best position to tell us when actually it's going to come on stream. And we are hoping that when it comes, it will also help to save some forex, because in terms of importing petroleum products. So that will now also be a thing of the past, whereby, because Dangote refinery alone, the whole refinery is owned by NNPC, Dangote refinery is larger.
Well, I mean, all this optimism about, oil price, spot price of oil price. OPEC trying to keep crude inventories in check and, get better prices. What if the non-OPEC members, if they decide, for example, to ramp up production, is that a possibility? And what will be the effect on prices, on the market?
You have a glut.
Yes.
So the non-OPEC members also would not want to do that because they are going to have a glut. So once you have a glut, so everybody loses. So what they are all doing right now is...
No, suppose it happens. What's the implication for Nigeria?
No, we are in trouble. Yeah. Because it's very clear, if you have a glut, and let's say we now start doing $50, $40, then we are going back to our currency will be devalued. There's just no way government can withstand it. If it gets to, we are not doing 40, let's say we are not doing $40 per barrel, the government will have no choice than to devalue. First, if they don't devalue, then they will have no other option than to also take away the subsidy. This time will be whole scale, and then you know that wholesale, I know that what that will do to the economy, and probably some protest on the street over that. So the government is between the chicken and the egg. But hopefully, which of course is sad that we are saying this again and again and again. Hopefully that the price remain where they are. But ordinarily, we should be diversifying away from having our fate determined all the time by the price of crude.
Absolutely, because it's more than just a Dutch disease at this point in time. We seem to continue to come back, and it seems as though crude is now like our grassroots and the fuel of our economy in so many different ways. And that focus in itself is a problem. Diversifying the economy is something we speak on all the time, but how exactly do we do that when we're in a country that has such low human development index? What's the starting point?
Education is key.
On what budget,
Education,
though?
yeah, let's look at it. Education is key. Security is key. So if you take, for example, we don't run, what we do mostly in this part of the world is that we run government on a ad hoc basis. If we run government on the fact that, now, where are we at the moment? I'll give you an example of India. India decided to look at it and say, okay, fine, let's take advantage of IT. And over a period of time, they develop along that line. So, but in our own case, even the crude oil we're talking about, we are not in charge. The IOCs are the people in charge. How many Nigerian businessmen are running that aspect of it? We've not gone to the level of asking ourselves, how do we make sure we take advantage of this? So we didn't do anything like that. And the key to that is to ensure that people are educated. People can manage that sector. People can manage that industry. And then you go back to time past, agriculture. I'm not talking of, because the way we talk about agriculture now is laughable. Because I'm not talking about agriculture in the sense that you are asking a 22-year-old, a 23-year-old, 24-year-old graduate who just left the university, and you say, go into agric, and at the end of the day, cannot buy a smartphone. There's the business side of agriculture. We should lay emphasis on that and not coming to tell people, oh, go back to the farm. Are you asking them to farm the way their forefathers farmed? No. So we need to also look at that. And then even look at entertainment. If you look at it, there's no chain. Whether it's Davido, whether it's P-Square, these guys just fought on their own. So there's no chain tying it together to ask yourself, in Hollywood, they can do projections. They know that if they support Drake, Drake is going to pay X amount as taxes. They know if they support Beyonce, Beyonce will pay X amount of taxes. So Beyonce knows that the system is taking care of her, and she will also contribute to the system. But somewhere you have P-Square, you have Wizkid, everybody has to do that on their own basis without the state. So if you don't sit down and have a plan, and also interact with them and say, okay, how can we be of help? Because what we do most times is that there's no feedback. Government comes up with a policy, there's no feedback. So when you don't have policy feedback, how do you know that you are making an error? How do you build on what you have? So not until we start doing all of this, and not just somebody comes up now, you come to my local government and you tell me you want to give me water. Is water our major needs? First of all, you need to find out what is the major needs. You want everybody to go to school and they don't have power. In the rural areas, somebody comes back from school at 2 o'clock. He can't read once it's 4 or 5 because it's dark. There's no light for him to read. And he reads with a lantern, he loses his eyesight. That also now gives you a challenge. Your health system is now be overburdened over something that is preventable. So if we need to change the way we do things, we need to look at we need to have a composite view of the economy. And not just wait for OPEC cut, or the price of crude is high, or America is against Iran, and suddenly the price spike, then we are all happy. So not until we are able to see the chain, that development is actually a chain. And you have to define where are you going. Where do you want your country to be in 10 years?
Well, I mean, you talked earlier on about Russia, the partnership between Russia and Saudi Arabia particularly. Those are the two strong countries driving the politics of OPEC. Now, but how about the role of the United States? What's your assessment of it? On one hand, you know, the U.S. wants OPEC countries to increase supply in order to bring down prices. At the same time, there is a threat of shale oil, and shale oil companies are ramping up production, even if it is more costly, you know, to process. What exactly do you make of the U.S.? On one hand, asking for supply, and at the same time, imposing sanctions on Iran.
If you look at what the U.S. does, is that U.S. double speak on issues like this. Because first thing, if the U.S. wants you to bring the price down, in 2 weeks they can achieve it. If they want the price to go down, because whether you like it right now, they have one of the largest inventories in the world. United States.
Crude.
Yes, crude inventories. Yes, they have one of the largest. So if they want to bring the price down, they can pump in, they can also reduce their strategic reserve. That can also bring down the price. But on the other hand, they also want to encourage the shale, whoever is extracting crude from shale. So what you have is that what they do very well, give it to them, they know what their national interest is. And once they arrive at this is their national interest, they tell you what to do. They can just say it for the sake of saying, but they're not going to ramp up pressure. Because if Americans really want to do it, they will ramp up the pressure and the prices will go down. They have several ways of doing that.
Well, but in the long run, I mean, you talked about diversification. Leila asked you about, diversification. Do you think that, the Nigerian government, either now or in the past, is really serious about diversifying the economy?
I don't think they have. I don't think in the last 40 years, I think we've been hearing diversification. I don't think we are really serious about it. But I also think it's something that we are not going to run away from. There are two things that may likely happen. It's either we planned, even we are still going to suffer for it, or it's just like a man falling from a story building. He has two options. There's a fire. Of course, it's either going to be consumed by the fire, which of course he has no control over, or he has to take a jump with his two eyes open to decide, okay, which part of the floor am I going to land so that I don't suffer maximum damages. But I think that's where the country is going to get to. Because whether we like it or not, with what is coming, electric cars are going to come. People are talking about clean energy. It's going to gather steam in the next 10 years. And so if our attention is still on crude oil coming from the Niger Delta, I think in the next couple of years, it's around the corner, we are going to be very, very disappointed. So that's why I'm saying, whether we like it or not, that's the direction we have to go. But our system, we have a lot of system failures. There are challenges within the system. Because for you to grow, the system also needs to be right. I don't need to know Ruben. If you run a system whereby I need to know Ruben to get what I want, then you are going to fail. So that's also a systemic failure there. So for us to get around all of this is that we need to look at the system, we need to look at the structure of our government, and we also need to look at the values of how we do things.
Absolutely. So where exactly does Pengasan come into this? What would you say Pengasan is doing at the moment to influence this in any way that you guys can?
I think Pengasan, I will say that again and again, they always influence government. They reach out to government. But at the end, if government is not listening, just like Obasanjo would say, you can advise me, but I have a choice to either accept or reject your advice. So when you advise government and they are not listening, there's very little you can do. So all the unions now do is go back to their shell and just make sure their members keep their job.
Well, I mean, in the papers today, the Minister of Labor was talking about the new national minimum wage. And he says, to be legal for any employer of labor not to pay. But he was talking about working out a template for the payment. Why are we just negotiating a template now after the new national minimum wage bill has been signed into law? Do you suspect that this may be an attempt to further delay and that the minister is probably double-speaking?
Yes, because I know that I was part of the previous one where it was moved to 18,500. Government always do that, and I don't know why. Because you make a law, and one thing you expect from government is that government should respect its laws. Once a minimum wage has been agreed at, there's no template that you need to work out. If I'm going to give, maybe they're trying to spread out the 30,000 minimum wage on what goes to housing, for example, what goes for transportation. But I just think that minimum wage, you have a minimum wage, you have the law should be respected.
But if you continue to pay out of pocket for the same things that you mentioned, sir, when we spoke about the fact that even though we may have things coming in, we're still going to pay out of pocket, then how exactly does a new minimum wage then become relative? Or are we still going to continuously see the same problems coming up?
I think we are still going to see the same problem. If you ask me to talk for Pengasan or TUC, where I was past president, basically, minimum wage don't have anything to do with an oil worker, for example. He's far.
You guys are well paid.
No, really, no.
You are not complaining.
It's still not enough. But what we're talking about is that in solidarity, you take, for example, those who will be major beneficiary of the minimum wage. What a lot of people don't know, attention is on the formal sector. What a lot of people, there are a whole lot of Nigerians in the informal sector. Those who work in a gas station. Unlike what you have in Europe and America, where it's compulsory that you give a tip. There are so many people who make enough money from basically getting tip, but you don't have that culture here. So those in the gas station, those who are domestic staff in the various homes, those who are security guards, those are main beneficiaries of this, who are not members of TUC or PENGAC or NLC. So those ones, people don't factor that in. And when you pay minimum wage, what also does to your economy is that it stimulates the economy. Because it's not those who earn 10 million naira or 20 million naira every month that actually stimulates the economy. It's actually, most of those who have those money in their accounts. But those who spend money on day-to-day basis are those who stimulate the economy, because the money needs to move around. Absolutely. But unfortunately, some state governors are already complaining that they may not be able to pay. But I think the union have also done their homework to know that, yes, they should be able to pay if they are able to eliminate a lot of wastages that are in the system.
Well, and if they don't pay, what should we expect?
If they don't pay, the unions know what to do.
They're talking about the unions. One of the things the Minister of Labour was saying in the papers today is that the Trade Union Congress and OPEC may be proscribed because they've not been making, providing proper accounts of check-off dues that they take from their members, and that's in violation of the Trade Union Act.
I think prescribing it, that won't happen. But I also think the unions are wrong not to have rendered accounts. It's very wrong. I'm surprised when I heard about it. I heard about it about 2 weeks. I think the Guardian called me for an interview about it. I was surprised. Normally, you're supposed to make an annual return. So if you're not making these annual returns, then you are getting yourself into problem with the Ministry of Labour. But again, one other thing you also find out why I was talking about why our system, we have a lot of problems, why things don't work. How did this happen? Why did the minister suddenly start talking about TUC and OPEC not making returns? Because of the protest against the minister over Franco Kori. But why did he say this in January? So which invariably means that you have information, you keep it until when you think somebody is doing something that is doing something wrong or that is against you. But once you've seen this infraction, from day one, you issued a letter to them and say, if you don't do this, and I'm happy that the TUC responded immediately. The TUC president, I also called the TUC president. He said he had gone to meet with the minister, and the minister agreed that, okay, fine, they have up till June. And the TUC president said, yes, that it will be made available. Ordinarily, the Registrar of Trade Union is in charge of that. So we should also look at Registrar of Trade Union. You are supposed to send an annual letter to each of these unions to make them know. And also, I am a believer, and I support the fact that the unions should also be checked. We need to know how much they are generating from check-off dues. We also need to know what they are doing with the money from the check-off dues. And we also need to know minutes of their NEC meeting. There are some unions whereby millions of loans were taken without going to the NEC. So if all that is checked out, then it's also in the best interest of the union to be accountable before they can criticize government.
Well, you mentioned Franco Kori, all that drama over the board, of the chairmanship of the board of the Social Insurance Trust Fund, NSITF. Now, what's your take? What's your reaction to the role that Labour played in that particular case, going to barricade the minister's home at 4 a.m. and engaging in physical combat, threatening members of his family, whereas it is a prerogative of government, to appoint persons to the boards?
I think that was a very unfortunate incident that happened. First, I don't think Labour handled it well. I don't think the leaders that wasn't the way I think it should have been done. First of all, you can picket the minister in his official residence, not in his private residence. I don't subscribe to that, and I think that was wrong on the part of NUPENG and NSC to have gone that far. Secondly, I also believe that it should not have been a public issue. There are what we call informal contact, which of course, and I've had conversation with a lot of them, and I said there is what we call, initially we talked about in negotiation terms, we talked about win-win. And then there's also, I told them that the current one now is mutual interest. You no longer do win-win. And we had a conversation, I said win-win is more like you have a wife and then the husband who's a drunkard, and because of sake of peace, the wife will not want to talk, allow the husband to be. And then one day the wives get angry, but at that particular time, because the wife is not talking, the husband is enjoying his bottle, both sides are winning. But one day something goes wrong, and then, but I said, what we should be doing now is mutual interest. What's the interest of the minister? But you can find out the interest of the minister by having that informal dialogue. And what is your interest? Your interest is simple. You believe that Kokori, being chairman of NSITF, will protect the workers more, contributions coming in. And the minister feels that it's his own right. The law is very clear that the minister recommends to become the chairman of NSITF. So if the minister have done that, and if you use your informal contact, you will know where the direction is, because it's the president's prerogative to decide who chairs NSITF. And the minister cannot act without the support of the president. So I don't think they handle that issues very well at all.
Yeah, indeed. At the end of the day, the president supported the minister.
Of course.
And appointed Franco Kuri, chairman of the Michael Imudu Center for Labor Studies.
Yes. Of course, I expect the president to queue behind his minister. But if it had been well managed, it would have been easier to, if you have done it informally, it would have been easier for them to put the president on the spot. There are certain things that I think they should have done, but I don't want to discuss it here, and which I think they didn't do. And if they had done that, that would have made the job a lot difficult for the president.
That's fair enough.
Well, I mean, how will you assess Dr. Ngige as Minister of Labor? You've had cause to work with so many ministers, you know, in the past. Do you think that he's necessarily overbearing, or is it a question of style, or is just insistent on certain principles that Labor may not, you know, want to accept?
I think one of the things that we also don't do very well. Yes, you can talk about principle, you can talk about style. But the bottom line, again, is that when you are dealing with labor, there are two basic ways. I always say there's a difference between human resource, when you talk about human resources department, and industrial relations. It's your responsibility to make sure that everything you need work in harmony. Once everything you have works in harmony, then things move on. But I think if you ask me about the highlight of Ngige's administration or Ngige's tenure as Minister of Labor, maybe the national minimum wage. But outside of that, if you talk about Inspectorate Division in Ministry of Labor, it's still in comatose. Those are more important areas. A National Directorate of Employment, you ask yourself, where are the data to show how many people have been employed in the last couple of years? You can't get those data. And then you also look at the HSC, Health, Safety and Environment aspect of it, which of course also come under the Ministry of Labor, where you have people leaving the ministry to go and see the factories that Nigerians are working in.
And what gets me with that is you can't get that data with regards to how many people have been employed, yet this is the same minister who did actually also come out to say it doesn't even matter if we have X amounts of doctors leaving the country because we have enough doctors in the country. But then where's the data for him to really go by to support that? Exactly.
You see, one of the things we don't do very well here is that statistics, the MBS is doing its best at the moment. At least there are certain things, like certain information you cannot get from MBS, which many years ago you would not get. But if you are asking me to say, let me look at Ngige's administration, and I will tell you, I really can't put my hand on it. I've not seen how many factories that are sealed. You and I know that a lot of things are not done properly in this part of the world. A couple of years ago, we had to now ask, somebody came into our office, and we wanted to have a vent change. And the guy is not trained to even understand why that should be in the opposite direction. So what is the training of the officers, even in the Ministry of Labor? The capacity building, in terms, you look at negotiation, workers are even better prepared. If you are going to negotiation with the ministry, we always laugh. We live there, and we're laughing that they are digging a grave for themselves. But it's not for you to tell them. First is that the ministry also needs to train its members. That's why, look at the various negotiations they've gone into. With ASU, they have a problem. With TUC, they have a problem. With Pengasin, they have a problem. Why do you always have such problem? It's because you don't send your best to go and negotiate. And your best they don't understand the current mood and style of negotiation.
Well, before we let you go, one more question from me. Can Nigeria ever solve its energy crisis? I mean, because if you look at the mix, too many contradictions. We have gas, we can't even, evacuate the gas effectively enough to generate electricity. Even at the point of, generation, transmission, and distribution, we have issues. And then we talk about all these issues in the oil and gas sector.
We can. We can't solve our energy challenges if we do things the proper way. If things are not done right, these are the things we are facing right now. Now, who are those who took over the power plants? I happen to be part of those who negotiated. At the end of it, those who were coming in to privatize, during the privatization, who are those? They don't have a clue. Because what you have now is that if they have a clue, we will not be where we are now. So they don't have a clue. So once you have people who don't have a clue about where they are going, suddenly you have all manners of problems. People are talking about transmission, are talking about GENCO, are talking about discos. We have challenges all over. And then you also have businessmen, the quality of businessmen we have in Nigeria. People who want to make 100% profit in the first year of doing business. Even as little as metering. How do you do that? You are coming to run a business, you want to bill people, and you expect them to pay, and there's no meter. So until we do things the right way, we cannot. Even there are other parts of the world that they use coal to power energy. So we must have the right mix, clean energy, coal, and what have you. But the first thing is that we must put square pegs in square holes.
Well, thank you very much, Peter Esele. Always a delight to have you on the morning show.
Welcome.